So, reading the Magdalene manuscripts or having the Magdalene manuscripts read to me has been a huge part of my awakening and growth over the past 3 years. And I know that Mary Magdalene has played a role in you and helped you even to grieve, which you could say is a form of death, right? It's like a it can be transmutational. But how has working with Mary Magdalene energy, how has moving through this portal helped you to either balance or activate this masculine and feminine inside of you?
Such a big topic. It's like almost feels overwhelming for me to try to imagine putting words into space that would give justice to this topic. But
if anyone can do it, you can.
We'll surrender to the divine here and let it flow through here. So I grew up in a Judeo-Christian family. Went to a great church in Boulder, Colorado.
Started preaching when you were 12.
Beautiful church for that, actually, and that the church was built on a model of what a church would look like in the Book of Acts. So the Book of Acts was written right, following the death of Christ and that whole lineage. And the Book of Acts lays out what the church should look like. There should be no pastor or single leader of any church, which is interesting that didn't work out so much as a template. Like that didn't get followed very well, but that's how the church worked. So we had no pastor. Instead, there was a group of elders that were responsible for kind of the management operations and the teachings that would kind of be manifest in it. And then there's a group of deacons that are kind of the operational, feminine flow through that space holding of the elders. And so the deacons, and then there's the congregation, and the congregation is expected to participate in the exploration and expression of, the divine, pursuit or exploration that would happen in the walls of, a sacred space like a church. And so the church had basically two experiences in every Sunday service, one of which was somebody within the congregation sharing from their life, their experiential life, a scripture or an antidote or part of their life, and kind of a 15-minute experiential, description of their dance with the divine. And that was the little mini sermon that led to this ritual that in the Christian environment, Catholic environments, is called the breaking of bread, or the sacrament, which is a representation of body and blood, which ultimately is an expression of the masculine and feminine. And
I never thought about it like that. I love that.
The body is certainly that space holding thing that says, here's a loaf of bread, or here's my physical body. It's the cubes. It's the thing that makes it visible as such and such. But then it's the energy within the blood. It's the flow of energy through the body that is the feminine. And nobody had ever told me that before. And so, but the church had prepared me, I think, in ways for this experience of the masculine and feminine. And certainly I was prone to a deep patriarchal version of, spirituality, as is the Christian church as it stands today. God is this father figure, and Christ is the Son of God, and it's male, 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 male all the way down. Holy Spirit, another masculine kind of thing, blah, blah, blah.
All of the disciples that we know about.
The 12 disciples, the things, and all this. So that was the construct I was coming out of. So I believe I was taught much, much truth in that space, but a half-truth is as sometimes more terrifyingly disempowering than a flat-out lie, And so I believe that I had reached this pinnacle of depression and dysfunction within my own life for the vigorous pursuit of the half-truth that I had been handed. And what hadn't been handed to me was the blood. I had not been taught that the feminine flow through the body of what we might call Christ or the divine masculine or whatever that might be. And we have to remember that this is a very modern experience. 2,000 years ago is a drop in the bucket compared to the 300,000 years of human history and all this. So it's silly to think that some English translation from the Aramaic that would have been written 2,000 years ago somehow has the wisdom for the universe, right? But we hold that, and there are truths in there. And so how do you see the truths and then recognize there's an opportunity for the whole to fill in? And that's where Mary Magdalene kind of came in. Turns out there's a whole body of work that came out of scripture writing and all of this through the accounts of those that were alive at that time. And those became known now as the Gnostic Gospels, but they were basically the gospel recordings of what happened during the life of what we call Christ and what happened there around that didn't get included in the Bible. The Bible, as it's known today, was, ordered in about 200 years after that period by a Roman who is inherently neither Hebrew nor what we would call Christian today. And so this Roman, emperor basically said, well, let's assemble this to kind of create a story in which, we can maintain control over this part of our population within the Roman Empire that seems determined to create a revolution. And so the Bible got distilled down to the current books that it is. And it's not to say that those are necessarily wrong, or it's just, again, it's a partial truth. Mm-hmm. And so I found the Gnostic Gospels. My church talked about the Gnostic Gospels. I was exposed a little bit to them during that journey. The book of Timothy, fascinating, beautiful book that really, I thought at the time that I read that, well, that's my door-off version of the Christian story, the story of energies and miracles and all that through the book of Thomas. Totally different experience than the Gospels that were put into what's today the King James Bible or something like that. But all that journey, nobody had mentioned to me that Mary had written a gospel. And so the Gospel of Mary became a massive revolution in my life coming just a few years back. And it was the first time that I had gotten to see that story of transformational energy in a human experience through the eyes of the feminine. And I think what it did was ultimately put the blood flow back into the body that I had learned so well as a child. And I loved my whole church experience. There wasn't a moment that I felt disempowered by it or discredited by it. I mean, my church was amazing people, incredible families. What happened thereafter, the other churches as I joined, youth groups, and then as I went beyond kind of the bounds of the Christian church and started working with indigenous groups around the world ultimately, and hearing their version of the divine story within their histories that were so radically different than any Western mind and Western story of that would be captured in the histories I was taught, started to see all the patterns repeating. And so you start to realize we're all having the same experience with the divine or with nature itself. And for that, we are creating human stories, human narratives. And human stories and human narratives are a beautiful way to kind of share and experience the beauty of all of that together. But if there's a systematic effort at some point in history to eliminate half that story, then we start to lose that ascension pattern of our own spiritual awareness. We lose the ascension capacity of our own religious storytelling, and we start to degrade the energy of what it means to be human dancing with the divine, or the divine dancing within a human body. And for that sense of disconnect, I don't deserve God, I am a sinner, I have been disconnected from source. That root story that became the calling card as to why you needed a church and a pastor and a dogma to get you back to holiness. That whole pattern of the solution is outside of yourself and you have to go find it has been played out in every aspect of our society. Religion is just a tiny example of it, but you look at our macroeconomics, our microeconomics, you look at politics, you look
medicine,
at education as a whole. Medicine is a great example of it. And so we have repeatedly been told that we are dysfunctional, we are broken, we are diseased, we are sick, we are sinners, we are this. And so now you need this drug, you need this pharmaceutical, or you need this scripture, or you need this experiential experience to become whole again. And the Mary Magdalene journey took me smack into the realization of the worst way in which we do this, perhaps. Certainly the most disempowering way that we do these externalizations is in relationship. And so that was the thing that really blew my life apart more than anything other single discovery in life. And so when you say, Mary Magdalene, what is that about? Well, I guess it's about a human that wrote a story from her experience about the transcendent nature of the capacity of the masculine and feminine to intertwine, not just between human beings, but first in yourself. How did Mary Magdalene become a Holy Grail? How did Christ and that whole life become something of a holy grail in which life could be transformed, life could be fundamentally shifted in the form of what we now call today miracles. How did miracles get manifested through these people that were just human beings at the time? What were they confirmationally achieving inside of themselves, such that if somebody ill and dying came and stood next to them, touched the edge of their clothing, could be spontaneously healed, spontaneously remitted? I have seen spontaneous remission happen. I know that miracles happen. We have to have a term in medicine called spontaneous remission because writing miracles in medical charts is not accepted.
You'll
We
get
are
kicked out of
literally
school.
told you cannot do that. And so if you can't write miracle, we need some other word. So here's your scientific word for miracle. It's spontaneous remission. What does that actually look like? That looks like somebody who has stage 4 cancer with metastases from their breast cancer into their brain, into bone, all over their body, riddled, and they are dying, and then something happens, and suddenly they look suddenly healthy, and all of their metrics are improving, labs are improving. Finally, the doctors rescan them, and not only is the cancer somehow healed or gone, there's absolutely no evidence it was ever there. There's not a single scar tissue. There's nothing that replaced the tumor to say, well, that's where it used to be and now there's scar. It literally goes back to an expression of perfect design. A body at its end of life is capable of realigning to its original perfect design. We have to call that spontaneous remission. We call it miracle, whatever it is. That happens with stunning regularity in our space of medicine, and we write it off, we hide it, we rationalize it, we do all kinds of things to deny that existence of that thing, because if that is true, then there is no role for a drug. There's no role for anything outside of the patient itself, because that individual is the vessel that remembers its original design. The original design is the relationship between the imagination of nature, we could call that God, the imagination of God itself, bringing to fruition a planet, bringing to fruition a species on that planet. There was such perfect vision of what that species would look like that it would emerge like that at some point. And so something in nature is imagining itself, reimagining itself, such that with every death, something more spectacular is born out of it. And so there is this ascension pattern where it's more complex, more biodiverse, more beautiful with every single reimagination of existence, of nature, of life, all the way up. And so now we are asked to dance in this space of the masculine and feminine completing itself within a single individual. And this is where it comes back to that sad realization that the one place we do not believe this is possible is within our own bodies. And so we reach outside of ourselves to complete the masculine and feminine all the time. And we don't just do this with other humans. We do it with the pharmaceuticals. We do it with the things we try to own. Yeah. Owning something is very much a wounded masculine, belief system. The wounded masculine in each and every one of you believes that you need something to make yourself happy, and that need of that other thing, that outside thing, to bring peace, happiness, comfort, and all that is your wounded masculine expressing itself. Your shopping behavior is ultimately, that wound.
Is that the same of fixing? Like owning it is, I'm not complete, I need to own this to be complete, or this thing is broken, I need to fix it. That's also wounded masculine?
That's certainly my version of wounded masculine. I try to fix everything all the time. It's definitely my Achilles heel. But, I think the ownership piece, I think, is in direct response to scarcity. Okay. And so because you do not believe you can get everything from within, because you do not believe that God is within you, because you believe you have been divorced from God, nature, the divine, you immediately have to develop a scarcity mindset. And for that, you develop an ego, And so you have these egoic shield that then protects your split mind, this belief that you are unwhole. And the ego is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You grabbed something to shield yourself, and that shield reinforces the split in your existence.
And did the teachings of Magdalene changed something in you where you felt more whole, or you're like, oh wait, I can't source the feminine from outside of me, I find it inside of me. Like, what is it about that transmission that allows the spontaneous remission to happen? What is it about those missing gospels that creates this sense of wholeness?
Yeah, when you read Mary, I mean, everybody will have a different experience with that information, I guess. So it'd be unfair for me to tell you what you're going to experience with that information when you read Mary's gospel. But for me, I think that what began to happen, and maybe it wasn't instantaneous, but certainly a beginning of a journey that maybe isn't even complete or anywhere near complete yet, but it began in me a deep understanding that I had been reaching outside of myself to experience love. And when you reach outside of yourself to try to connect to a vibration, a frequency that can only be the result of seeing beauty, our capacity to see beauty results in this vibration of love. When we keep reaching outside of ourselves for that vibration, we continue to deny that the beauty is within ourselves. And so I had radically discounted my own beauty somewhere deep in my subconscious, probably programmed into me somewhere between ages 3 and 7 years old. Society at large, the kids on the playground, my parents, my grandparents, my church, my entire social system was telling me over and over again in a million different voices that I wasn't enough. I didn't fit in. I didn't, measure up. I wasn't good enough. And they did this subconsciously, consciously. They did it through, all kinds of mechanisms, all of which ultimately boil down to basically 3 vibrations that we've named in different emotions, but they're basically just states of existence: fear, guilt, shame. And those extreme vibrations, those very, potent vibrations of fear, guilt, and shame. Again, trying to think about those as words is very reductionist. Try to think about the feeling rather than the emotion of fear. What does it feel like to be in fear? What does it feel like guilty? What does it feel like shame? It's those feelings that have taken the vibrational structure, the literal water conformation inside of every one of your cells, into a lesser complexity, into a lesser beauty. It has degraded the sacred geometry within the crystal structures of the water within your cells, the liquid crystal of your bones. You have been deteriorated by these 3 experiences: fear, guilt, and shame. And then we look at religion, we look at school systems and the way that they operate. It's all guilt, shame, fear, guilt, shame, fear. And so education, whether it be in the church or the school, is this learning that you are incomplete, this learning that you won't measure up, learning that you're always pursuing some external metric of value to justify your existence, And so that's, I think, sadly, what we're handed, and what I glimpsed in it's what I glimpse in all scriptures from all backgrounds and everything else is original truth. Before fear, guilt, and shame, what was truth? And what did it feel like to interact with that? And I can open up the King James Bible and be immediately heightened. I can immediately go into an experiential state of truth with the information in there. But if that's my only tuning fork, I'm missing half the symphony, right? And so it's not that any of it's sinful or dark or evil or any of that. It's all high vibrational information over and over again. And a lot of scripture is storytelling of people that are going through, their valley of death and are discovering truth. Through their stress, they are discovering truth. And that's all of the Bible stories, So you got all these scriptures, which are, i.e., historical accounts of the struggle against nature and then the discovery of nature within the self. And so you can find that over and over again in every, biblical text out there. You can certainly find it in the Quran and so many other documents out there. The Tao Te Ching is one of my favorites out there if you really want to just feel what it is to experience original truth before patterns of belief happen. The Tao Te Ching in its poetry, and read like 5 different translations of it, because the English, again, is such a poor language for communicating the energies that are in something as complex as that text. And so read 5 different versions of that for yourself and really soak in that and realize that, there's so much more color between the words in a text like that. And what is you have to memorize the words there and believe that that's the truth? No, it's the energy that's flowing between the space. The words are holding the masculine. The words are holding the space for you to flow your own spiritual existence through, to find your own beauty. And Magdalene did that so potently to me. I was being seen by a being that had crystallized within herself some appreciation and understanding of the divine masculine and feminine energies within herself. And in her completion, she became the perfect mirror to those around her. And perhaps, this Christ figure had no better front row seat to that than anybody else. And so what was transpiring was 2 humans were actually seeing completed versions of themselves. And our modern texts of the Course in Miracles says that is what we are striving for humanity. That's what hasn't happened in humanity, is the completion of the masculine and feminine within an individual so that they can be seen. And I think that's the interesting result of completing the masculine and feminine, is you can finally be seen. And so it's interesting that for as, instantaneous of recognition we might have had as human beings, be like, I see you, I know you. What was really happening is you were seeing yourself in me, and you knew that vibration was true. And so my presence was enough to show you something spectacular about you. And we tend to attribute that to the other person. You're an amazing person. Well, that's true. You just can't see me, because I am not willing to be seen yet. So I hold an egoic shield somewhere in my subconscious level that no matter how vulnerable I feel like I'm being to you, you're only seeing yourself because I have created a patina, a mirror image, on the outside of me that reflects everybody out back at themselves. And the Course in Miracles says the moment Zach finishes the masculine and feminine within himself, the shield goes down. The ego necessarily, and opportunistically leaves the building, because there's no longer a role for it, because the masculine and feminine finished, and therefore nothing is needed by Zach to complete the divine within himself. And so at that moment, you would suddenly see me. And this Course in Miracles says that the moment 2 individuals actually see each other, there's an instantaneous conformational change in the human condition, and you ascend to these much higher levels of expression. And at that moment, the whole species has the opportunity to rise through that. And if we think back to the stories of Christ and Mary Magdalene and all that, is that not what happened? How is it that 2,000 years later, whether you think religion is bunk or not, whether you think Christ was real or not, whether you think Mary Magdalene was real or not, whether you think they were perfect beings or not, whether you think that was all fake or not, we're sitting here talking about those 2 individuals 2,000 years later? What the hell? And so there's something that happened 2,000 years ago between a small group of human beings that created so much conformational change that here we are talking about it 2,000 years later. And so that, I believe, is what the Course in Miracles is saying, is when this happens, those 2 individuals will see so much beauty that the frequency of love that will be achieved at that moment will be so transformational that it will literally create new portals of existence, new opportunities to rise, to ascend. And so what is the prey and what is the predator? The prey is the ego, waiting to be eaten and to release the being that it dwells within into that higher existence, to take flight finally. I've had extraordinary experiences off the coast of Mexico swimming with schools of fish that suddenly absorbed me. This school of sardines absorbed me for about 45 minutes, millions of sardines, and just complete cloud. So I have become in that space. I felt for a period of time more fish than I was human, because I was just a fraction of the biology around me for a moment. And there was so much vibration of sardine, of fish in that water. And here I am suspended in the perfect plasma of the ocean. And I became aware of what it feels like to be fish and to be part of a school of fish of millions, and to react as a single organism to the opportunities around it. and I have experienced a bird, and I have experienced what it must feel like to fly with freedom. And I can say that both are magnificent, ecstatic, orgasmic existences. And so the fish is in its full freedom and yet can imagine what it would feel like to be eagle. And so it gives up its life into the talons of the eagle. And so I can tell you that in our most elated states, we will imagine yet another transformation and confirmation in which we could achieve even a more extreme state of freedom. And so this is what I yearn for myself. And every day that I lose sight of that, every minute that I get distracted by traffic or an Instagram post or whatever the heck is going on in the world, there's grief within me. There's a heartbreak there. And ultimately, you asked about, the Mary Magdalene journey that I took this summer, and that was the unexpected result of that experience with me. I went to the south of France into this region called the Saint Baume Forest, and it is said that Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene both went to this region of France to live out their lives after the collapse of kind of the stability of the Hebrew and Aramaic peoples within the Roman Empire, and Rome was suffering and all that. And so after this period that we would call Christ's life, these two women traveled to this area, and there's this massive quartz crystal ridge line that runs in the south of France above the Saint Baume Forest, and in that are all these giant, you can't even sculpt things that are more anatomically correct than those caves being vaginal canals into that area of the planet geologically and geographically. And so we have these birth canals of the planet put into these that are manifest, self-manifest within nature there. And those two women found that space and lived out their lives there. And there's monasteries built there and honoring them, and the bones of Mary Magdalene there, and all kinds of fascinating things. I went there basically for a sense of just, my self-care, that, boy, this information stream that came through the Gospel of Mary, and then ultimately all the other Magdalene sources that I could get my hands on, so much of my life came back into flow through that information, that I was just going there to pay tribute. Mm-hmm. And what I unexpectedly ran into was, an energy field that I experienced as Mary Magdalene or whatnot, and it was a tree, embodied by this energy, and it nearly just tore me apart. I was, for the days following that, surprised that I survived the experience, because it was the most horrific torrent of energy I'd ever walked into in this physical life. I felt like I was being torn apart. I felt like I was being diminished to my biologic expression. I didn't know if I would even be able to take another breath when I was in the presence of this much tearing information and energy. And the energy was that of grief, the purest, most complete, most powerful vibration of grief. That if you'd said the word grief to me 10 months ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, I've experienced grief, lose a patient in a clinic, or lose a grandparent, lose a dog, whatever. Yeah, I've experienced grief. I have never experienced grief as a human being until I experienced whatever that energy field was. And while I'm experiencing this complete biologic deconstruction within the vibration of grief, this constant message is just flowing through. This is what unconditional love feels like. This is what unconditional love feels like. And I still haven't fully figured out all of the meanings of that, but I can say experientially, that's the level of grief that I should have, and at moments can feel in myself, every moment that I am given the gift of life and don't step into my full masculine and feminine completion. I have such grief that I am taking a breath and manifesting 70 trillion human cells that work in cooperation with, 40 quadrillion other microorganisms within me, outside of me, inside of me, to become something brighter than the sun by 10,000 times. And I take up the universe's space and in time and creative capacity, and don't let go of that ego and don't ascend. So heartbreaking. It is so heartbreaking that I would not take that opportunity. And I don't take the opportunity because I'm afraid. And that's why all of us have stayed in this vibration, is we are afraid to let go of the version of ourselves that we can see, because we have been disempowered from our own imagination, and we can only imagine that which we've experienced. And so because we cannot imagine what it would be like to be a Magdalene completed in the masculine and feminine, to be a Christ energy completed in the masculine and feminine, and we cannot believe how beautiful we are, and so we do not imagine it, and so we cling to the ego, and we stay split, and then we go into human relationship. The Course in Miracles calls that special relationship. Special relationship is defined in a very simple sentence. It ties back to one of your original things you wanted to hit on in this podcast, I think, at the beginning, which was the story of emptying out or being drained. The one sentence definition of a special relationship, which is said to be all forms of relationship that we do, whether to one another or to other things. A special relationship is a situation where you will look outside of yourself to another, and you will see in that person a trait that you don't believe you can get straight from the source, from the God, divine, whatever it is. And in not believing you can have it, you see that in them, and you go and cleave to that. You connect to that. And in so doing, you will now drain that person of that trait until it is gone, and then you will leave. That's a very terrifying one-sentence description of human relationships. And so when I read that and realized in that moment, I could immediately identify what trait that I had seen in my wife and partner of 20 years. We had 2 amazing kids, and we had just an extraordinarily beautiful, challenging, of course, relationship that held space not only for the birth of kids and houses and everything else we built together, but we also held space for our extended families. We saw death and dying and disease and mental health problems, all kinds of stuff that all of us will see in the journey of family. We held all of that. We experienced all of that together. And then, we left the relationship. In some ways it was, she had the wisdom, I think, ultimately, and the courage. Ultimately, she had the courage to actually leave the relationship. But we had both left the relationship long before the physical leaving happened. We had both left it at the mental, emotional, spiritual level, and I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was in the best marriage that anybody could have, because I was living out a very low vibration version of relationship that I had been taught was high vibration, that I had been taught was the whole purpose. And so be a good, husband and father, and be very monogamous, and never even think about cheating and all that. And that was all like falling off a log to me, because for whatever, my matrix is built for that stuff. Monogamy's easy. No matter how lonely you get in the marriage, you never look outside of it, because the marriage is the whole universe. You can't imagine anything outside of that. So for me, it was very easy to live in this microcosm of a very reductionist, low vibration expression of life, perhaps. But it ended. It broke my heart, did all the usual typical things. But as soon as I read that Course in Miracles line, oh my gosh, I know exactly what trait I saw in that woman that I cleaved to and drained out of her over a 20-year journey, leaving her completely empty of her greatest things. And now I get to see her as one of my dearest friends, filled back up and living out and expressing those things that I had drained out of her in this special relationship that I had been trained to do. And I knew exactly what trait she had cleaved to me on. I had another short marriage in my life, and I knew exactly what trait I had seen there and drained out of that human being, and exactly what they had drained out of me. And so I had enough experience in my life by the time I read the Course in Miracles definition of that, I knew it was true. And for that, not just to those 2 women, but to every relationship I've had, to coworkers, to schools and education systems, to every one of my 10,000 patients that I've had, I am sorry. I am so sorry I drained out of you the most beautiful things that God expressed through you, for my fear that I couldn't have those things myself. And I am sorry to all of you that I have been such a source of drain on the human condition, for my fear that I couldn't be complete, that I couldn't be directly loved enough by God, that I would seek to connect to all of you for that. I'm sorry to my matcha tea that I connect to you every morning because I think you have something that I can't get directly from source, and I drain out of you the very caffeine that I need. And like that, I'm sorry, matcha. And so it has been a very challenging and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful journey with the information streaming through. Much more than Magdalene, really the whole feminine capacity for sure, but really this deeper truth of the masculine and feminine in its completion is what creates miracle.
Yes.
The masculine and feminine in its completion within a single individual is what causes the divine to express itself, to birth, to ascend, to become a keystone species. What would it feel like to be a being that everything I touched was in holy relationship rather than special relationship? And then, of course, Miracles is very clear about what that looks like. Holy relationships, completion, masculine and feminine, every single individual, and suddenly we only can see and represent beauty to one another. And we do not drain each other. In fact, we are filled with overwhelming appreciation and gratitude and love for being witnessed by the other because we can finally be seen. Mm. And that's ultimately what every human being is striving for, is the opportunity to be seen. Mm. And all of the horror that we extract on one another at the nation state level, Gaza, what's going on there right now, is the result of special relationship. The Israelis, in their history, have a special relationship with the Palestinian peoples. They extract and pull from each other and drain each other and then blame each other and then destroy each other, and they kill each other's children and think it be a glorious act for the fact that they are in a special relationship. And so when we take that step back and realize, oh my gosh, this is the entire human condition, it gets really, really exciting because, my gosh, it is actually no effort to let the masculine and feminine completely intercourse within myself. That ecstasy is waiting to happen every millionth of a second in the quantum physics of who I am, because I do hold space to be a body, and I do have blood that flows through my veins, and I am the masculine and feminine, and I am the expression of every intelligence on this planet within the universe. And if I will just surrender to that for a second and stop reaching outside of myself and come back inside myself, that's an orgasmic state of living.
Mm. I think we just found the name of the podcast. Why isn't everyone in an orgasmic state of living? Well, I'll run it by your PR team before I publish it.
What could possibly go wrong? I see no problem there. Go print it.
But because there's such a beautiful through line here of medicine, our relationship with nature, our relationship with our romantic partners, what's happening politically, that if we do not have the ability to source that divinity inside of ourselves, if we do not have the ability to have a special relationship with ourselves that then can become a holy relationship inside of ourselves, then everything external will be an outpicturing of that internal perception of lack. Mm. And so how would you suggest someone start this journey? I mean, is it really just truly remembering that I already am my bones, I already am my blood, I already am the masculine and feminine, I already am whole and complete right here, right now. I don't have to do anything.
That's it. I mean, you just gave the cliff notes of life right there. That's it. You came into this world complete. It changed my life completely when I started birthing babies. I was going into engineering, had an opportunity to take a year off because I was so heartbroken from my first girlfriend. Only as dramatic as you can possibly be when you're 18 years old. I was like, oh my God, I can't possibly go to school for another year because I'm so heartbroken. So I took that year off, and the moment I decided to do that, of course, the universe delivered immediately the opportunity, and Aunt of mine who was working in the Philippines called up and was trying to reach my parents. I happened to answer the phone minutes after I decided I was going to take the year off, and then find myself 8 months later over in the Philippines, lived there for 6 months, birthed babies with a group of international midwives. The first baby that I birthed, on my own in an emergency situation in the back of a van rushing through the middle of the night in Manila was what looked like a stillborn child that was probably 24 weeks of age in the womb and born blue and was so tiny, fit, entire body in the palm of my hand. And that little tiny being was like my beginning of my experiential dance with miracle, that it is absolutely impossible that thing was so perfectly formed in my mind at that time. I just knew it was like, didn't make any sense that this thing coming out of a malnourished, heavily brain damaged, woman who was nonverbal, had been raped, was now pregnant didn't even know she was pregnant, didn't have the cognitive capacity to understand the concept of pregnancy, and yet she's birthing an infant that perfectly formed in her womb. And so out of the greatest depths of degradation and dysfunction of humanity is coming perfection. And every child I saw born thereafter, continued to reinforce the awe of watching damaged biology deliver perfect design. And no point was this more extraordinary than the birth of my first child. My son was born inside the amniotic sac, which is relatively unusual, but it's called being born in the veil in traditional,
my
midwifery
son was
circles.
as well.
So talk about that experience, because that's a being that hasn't yet come into its first breath yet, and yet it's fully aware and looking at you through that veil.
well, so I mean, for me, it was that he came out like it was like a balloon first, and so it actually did break like as he was coming out, but for the first part of the labor, he was still in it. So I guess it's half and half, but I didn't actually get to see him on call.
Unreal.
But it was wild.
Yeah. Wild. And so as he was born, my son is looking with these giant brown eyes through the amniotic sac.
So you're holding him.
Yeah, he'd come out and I was catching him. It was a home delivery. I was a kid. I was like 25 years old.
Whoa.
And so I'm a kid experiencing this thing coming out. And I thought I was like, knew everything. I'd birthed babies in multiple countries and was a doctor, or in medical school at the time. And so going through that whole experience, I thought I knew so much. And then this thing happened. I was like, I know nothing. I was like, and so watching a being still on the other side of that veil, fully conscious and feeling what it feels like to be witnessed by your own child is the most overwhelming confirmational shift that will ever happen to you as a person, probably. You are being seen by the divine because that child hasn't had a single human thought projected on it yet. It hasn't had a single human word projected at it yet. And so it is literally vibrating in its original form. This is the perfection. It is vibrating in what I would call the soul. The soul is very complex and very unique to each individual confirmation of sacred geometries that vibrate in the vacuum space. So this vibrational thing is called into the womb of a mother, and it vibrates there and allows a single cell to start to divide, and then over the course of a few weeks divide 70 trillion into 70 trillion cells that then self-organize the whole time, sub-differentiating into different cells and that have completely different shapes, looks, functions, and all that, and somehow knowing which cell needs to become which part of the body, and then where to migrate in 3 dimensions to become this perfect baby that would lay in the palm of my hand. With every single finger perfect, every single finger with a fingernail, somehow knowing exactly where to manifest. The perfection is so overwhelming. And that being staring at me from the other side of the veil has continued to humble me. That journey of being a parent, and my son's now adult, married, and has his own family and everything else. And so watching that whole trajectory, there isn't a single moment where I didn't have the opportunity to feel that complete overwhelm of that being predated human history, predated, anything that we would call a human experience. That thing I got to witness on the other side of the veil, and then I got to see it do a human journey. And I know what those two things feel like. I know what a human journey feels like in a child that was born through my experiential human journey. And I know what it looks like and feels like when there's an unchanging force within that being that has not any capacity to absorb or be changed by a human emotion or a human trauma or a human thing. I know what it looks like when you watch a soul on a trajectory. And so you experience these things in life, and as a doctor, you get to experience them in a very, very heightened state all the time, because you're having people walk into your experience every day that are at that death moment. They've been told they have a disease. They're told they're dying. My third subspecialty was hospice and palliative care, and I was admitting 80 patients a week to die. And so when you're looking at that much, other side of the veil. So beginning of my career looking at birth, the latter part of my academic career looking at the other, second rebirth. And both are as beautiful and mysterious as the other. And many times I got to see people die in the call or in the veil, in that they passaged across to death, and then they came back in and were able to look at me with new eyes, because they just saw the truth of everything. And then I shocked their chest. I pumped epinephrine into their bloodstream, and their eyes pop open. And the moment their eyes open, when you just recovered them from death for a moment, you get to see the same thing in their eyes that you saw in the child that was just coming through. Infinite trust, infinite awareness of their own beauty. It is such a beautiful thing to see in the eye of another human being. I am complete. And you get to see that. And when you see beings that I am complete is their most recent experience, because they are just now coming through the womb, or they are just now dying, it is the most beautiful thing you will ever witness. And you will want to be in that space all the time as soon as you see it. And that's what we are striving for, is I am complete. And right now we have to die to experience it, because the whole human journey is split by the ego, because we are afraid to allow the masculine and feminine to combine within ourselves. We are afraid that to actually step into our full divine creative capacity. And so we go through life unseen by our own design, and we rage against the machine for not seeing us, when in fact it's by our own design. And so we are in these disempowered, frustrated states towards one another, and nowhere is it more tragically demonstrated than in relationship. And then nowhere is it more likely that we will make the conformational, transformational change to wholeness than in relationship. And so I am intrigued, humbled, overwhelmed by the fact that we are called to continue to strive to find perfection within ourselves, i.e. the completion of what's already there. And the only way we can do it is by being seen by others. And that's terrifying, because it means that we have to keep signing up to be seen in our imperfect states, to be seen as our broken, psychotic states of egoic split. And you have to keep signing up for relationship in that broken state if you want to see yourself clearly enough to realize how much beauty is within yourself. And that's where it becomes hard. And so if there is a hard part of the human journey for me, it is hard to be willing to be seen again in my imperfection. Very difficult.
I see you.
In all my imperfections. Here they are.
I look forward to seeing more of your imperfections, because through my lens, through my eyes, you seem so outrageously powerful, so outrageously perfect, such an amazing and perfect in the imperfection.
And now that you've seen that, I would have to convince you to change your idea if I'm not going to be perfect.
That's right, because we are going to heal in community.
That's it. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. So, well, thank you for seeing me. I do feel seen by you, Emily. I feel like that's largely what happened in Egypt, is we as a group somehow subconsciously before arrival agreed to some sort of contract of I will be seen more fully than I have ever allowed myself to be seen, and I'm willing to see everybody more clearly than I've allowed myself to see before. And it's exciting to me that I think that contract is being fulfilled more and more frequently at higher and higher vibrations throughout humanity right now. And so for all of you listening, move into community, get surrounded by people that inspire you to vibrate at a higher frequency. Find the eagle that will pluck you out of your lake and consume you completely, because there is something out there. There's an experience out there. There's a being out there. There's something that's willing to destroy your current state of being so that you can become the next thing, and be willing to do that. Be willing to die to yourself so that you can live more fully tomorrow. Be willing to soar like an eagle tomorrow, But to do it, you're going to have to give up your fins, and you're going to have to give up your gills that let you breathe underwater, which is pretty freaking cool. And so like there's so many cool things about your current state of existence that it starts to be like, well, why would I let go of all these cool things? Like, I'm a good dancer, I'm a good thing, or whatever I'm doing.
Yeah, we must be willing to surrender who we are in order to step into who we can become.
It's hard to let go of because we can't imagine how beautiful it could get.
But you're so beautiful at that. You're so good at articulating the beautiful possibility on the other side of the impending death, and allowing us as a species to see what could be perceived as, well, fatalism. Well, it's over. No, well, so what? Soil's dead. Humans are expiring. So what? And or what could I do? So we go into apathy. And what you do so beautifully is that you're able to pull the lens back so that we can see this as a chapter and as a possibility to wake up, as a possibility to shift, as a possibility to find that wholeness inside of ourselves, to remember that divinity inside of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think there's a possibility that we stay in the amniotic sac of this rebirth of humanity. You know, maybe this is the first time I've had this thought, so this is not going to be smooth perhaps, but it strikes me that I could step into your encouragement that you had earlier. You suggested this doesn't have to be painful. And my immediate reaction to that was defensive, I think, towards my own pain of like, no, I definitely need my pain. Why would I voluntarily have my pain and all this stuff? And
what if those are your gills?
I even thought of, some quotes that I should use about pain. Amazing one that I heard recently, and I've shared on podcasts already, from Lynn Twist. She said that pain, and she was quoting somebody else, I can't remember who, but I attribute to Lynn. She says on a board meeting that we had recently, pain is what pushes us forward until vision can pull us forward. Mm-hmm. And so I had all of that in my mind when you said that there's no need for pain. And then suddenly what just came through is, what if we stayed within the amniotic sac during this rebirth process? We will continue to have the pressure of every contraction that the birth canal is going to necessarily do to push us through. Mm-hmm. But if we're constantly protected by the amniotic sac of our existence as a species, perhaps pressure doesn't necessarily have to be pain. And if we can differentiate between pressure and pain, we might find that the journey will be much more merciful than we think it. And the journey may be a much more gentle story than we are currently telling right now. So I appreciate you extolling us to this possibility of a painless thing. Pressure for sure, friction for sure, but perhaps not pain. It's an interesting concept, and it's triggering in me another area of a lack of self-worth. There's a deep part of me, I can feel it so thoroughly right now, this second, and I'm not sure I could have identified this before, but I can tell you right in my body right now where I have the deep beliefs that I don't deserve goodness unless I can withstand the pain. Mm-hmm. And so thank you for revealing those weaknesses within myself, those disempowering beliefs within myself. Appreciate that. That's a big gift.
Also, what if we can use our pleasure to transmute that pain into raw energy, raw potential?
It happens all the time. I'm so enthralled by pleasure as a concept because I ran from it for so much of my life, largely because of my religious teachings, and from the pleasures of that wealth can bring to the pleasures of which sex can bring. All of those were basically projected at me as evils, or things that would prevent me from getting to heaven or finding the divine.
You're like, oh wait, heaven could be here?
Like, yeah.
Heaven could be now?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's actually what they meant? It's right inside of me?
That's
it's right now?
That's a lot to handle. And that's what Mary Magdalene again showed me, and it's been bizarre to be traveling the world. I was just in India and stumble into this realization that, wait, this people's group in India have a very well documented history that Christ and Mary Magdalene were in this town before Christ's death in India, studying in the center of tantric arts of the world at the time. It's like, wait, what? Like, that's an untold story in the Christian church, so it's like.
And also thank you for saying that, because you might have just threaded the needle of my career in that one sentence. Wait, I've been studying the Vedas for 16 years, and then Mary Magdalene sort of initiated me into these activations. And so thank you for threading that.
She was there. So that's where she learned her stuff.
Yeah.
And so, absolutely the Vedas, absolutely the tantric arts, in that embodiment. And how could it not be that? How could we possibly learn to embody our feminine, whether we be male or female, if not through something akin to the tantric arts? If we can't learn in fact, if we were taught to fear, guilt, and shame, the movement of sexual energy through our bodies, which is to say the creative force within biology, if that's what we are demonizing, if that's what we're going to continue to fear, guilt, and shame into existence, who will we become? We will become this version of humanity over thousands of years of periods of reinforcing the fear, guilt, shame
and
of the creative force within you. And we will kill everything in the name of love, in the name of God, in the name of whatever. We will kill, we will kill, we will kill. We will not pray, and we will not predate. We will kill. And so, man, the pursuit of pleasure in your body is the experience of the masculine and feminine within yourself. And if you will begin to understand sensuality and sexuality and, in fact, human imagination in the context of that truth, that pleasure, ecstasy is the experience of that intercourse of the masculine and feminine within your own body. You will no longer look at your partner that you're relating to and say, well, I expect to give you this experience, or I expect this experience back from you.
You were supposed to complete me and you can't.
Yeah,
and so
you
I'm
can't
mad
pleasure
at you.
me, so this must not be, screw you. If you are not able to pleasure yourself into the highest vibrations through just your own awareness of self, no sensuality needed in the sense of touching, the sensuality of sensing yourself is the most pleasurable thing that will ever happen to you. And that's what happens when somebody dies and gets brought back into the body. What you are seeing in their eye is ecstatic pleasure of realizing they are whole and perfect and accepted and loved for the vibration of beauty that is within them. That is the ecstatic state. Are you willing to go to the other side of the veil, die so completely that you can experience that level of ecstasy and then pull that back into the human body to say, I am here? And now you will be a very, very different sexual partner to those around you. And I believe that we will reach a point where we can have what we currently relegate to sexual experiences, that level of pleasure, in the divine state of silence, in holding somebody's hand in a park, or, whatever, mundane thing you can think of, returning a library book. The fact that I was able to hold this body of wisdom that's been incarnated in this thing, and I took it home and I read in the darkness at candlelight, and I had this, and thank you so much, this thing that you held on these shelves waiting for me to be in this moment. There's so many words in there, and between those words there's so much feeling that you can't even believe it, and it took my breath away, and I cried and I laughed, and thank you so much. Here's the book back. That's the orgasmic experience of returning a library book.
I went on a whole journey with you. Oh, Zach Bush. I love you. They'll have to have a whole nother podcast about all the ways that I think you're outrageously amazing. But truly, thank you for your lifetime of dedication. Thank you for this otherworldly wisdom that somehow you're able to channel through your head and, most importantly, your heart. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the outrageous amounts of love that you give to every single person you come into contact with and every single being. Thank you for your willingness to die to who you were in order to step into who you are now and who you are becoming. Thank you for being willing to reframe what could be interpreted as tragedy into possibilities for miracles.
Mm.
If people want to learn more about you, if they want to support your missions, if they want to live an orgasmic life anywhere near you, where do they do that? Where do they find more about you?
Well, you'll put on a lot of frequent flyer miles if you want to be near me on the journey for sure. So
I got a buddy pass, so I can.
There you go. But I mean, obviously, there's the internet versions of that answer.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Which are things like URLs. So my website, zachbushmd.com, is a place.
Bush MD.
Yeah, which. I need to figure out what MD stands for. That's not medical doctor. There's got to be some other cool version of that acronym. But anyway, zachbushmd.com. You can kind of access everything that I do through that website. So lots to explore there. I've got, dozens and dozens of hours of content there, then kind of long form explorations of nature through different topics of science. What is it? What are viruses, and what is the beauty that is held within the virome? That came out at the beginning of the pandemic period to kind of reframe nature for us as we developed fear, guilt, and shame paradigms around that topic. And so that led to the Global Health Education Summit, and that's a whole series of free content that's there. Not just myself teaching, but also panels of experts that came together around topics that have been demonized or built in fear paradigms, and how to release the beauty within those topics. We have one coming up in just another week, which is looking at the topic of diabetes, obesity, and kind of the metabolic collapse and the beauty that's within that story, and how we reverse out of that pattern of expression. So zachbushmd.com to dive into nature in my basic science laboratory. Intelligenceofnature.com is where all that science kind of is held. That's where the dietary supplements have sprung out of our studies of ancient soil and how we connect human biology to true biodiverse systems that don't exist on the planet right now, but they've pre-existed us. And so how do we tie back into intelligences that pre-existed the human condition to elevate the human condition? That's the story of intelligenceofnature.com. And what can be possible when you connect your biology to ancient soil systems. The nonprofit stuff that we do, would love to have your participation. Farmersfootprint.us. We have also organizations in Australia and the UK, EU that you can plug into there. And then there's, Journey of Intrinsic Health, which is kind of the distillation of all my clinic and everything else. So if you're at a point in your life where you really would like to have a conformational change in relationship to the biology within you, to the nature within you, that is an 8-week journey with the coaching stuff that we mentioned and all that.
And what is that called?
journeyofintrinsichealth.com.
Okay.
If you can't remember that, you can again go to the Zach Bush MD website, and there's links for it there. You can find links for all those things in my Instagram account too, which is, I think, that Instagram language. I think it's at Zach Bush MD there in the IG world. Facebook, we're there. I'm told that I'm on TikTok too, but I don't even know how to get to that platform. So
it's best.
Somewhere out there, you're going to find me there too. And anyway, you'll find me around. But ultimately, that's the URL version of how do you find me. But I think, honestly, for all of you, what I would invite you to is go find me outside. I am a fractal of nature, and if there's something that you've heard this time around in this conversation we've had, you're going to find me in the hug with your grandmother more than you will on a website. You're going to find me, in beautiful places of the world, because my heart breaks for our separation from those spaces, and so you'll help me be in those spaces when you give witness to the beauty that are in those spectacular elements of nature. And so please move out into nature this week. And if you're inspired by anything we've said today, go make intercourse with that nature out there, because it's the only thing that can actually heal you, because the humans around you right now are on the same ascension path. They're waiting for the same eagle to pluck them out of the water. They are not the eagle. So stop looking at each other with expectations of ascension through our interactions, but be willing to be the fish in the river together that is waiting for this ascension moment and calling it in. Picture it, to the best of your ability. Imagine humanity being plucked out of our current aqueous state into the first breath of fresh air on wings of an eagle. Let's do that thing together. Let's go and rise. Let's go and rise, people, because it's worth the effort of surrender to have that magical transformation occur, which again takes no effort. It is a completion, not an achievement. It is a completion, not a lie. And so this is our opportunity. You all are in it with me, and I'm in it with you. And so find each other in nature, find the beauty of yourself by being seen by the cloud in the sky. And that takes a huge amount of effort, y'all. Is don't go out and just go see the sunset. Let the sunset see you, and then you will be changed. And so let nature see through your egoic shield to be witness. I don't think it is safe for you to let down your ego in front of humans. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's not safe. You will be hurt. But the cloud will not hurt you. The oak tree will not hurt you. The river will not hurt you. The sky and the stars will not hurt you. The moon will not hurt you. Nature is such a benevolent lover, and you will not be hurt by letting go of your ego to be seen by that lover. And so take down the shield and start to practice what that feels like. What does it feel like to be without an ego in front of God, which is nature staring back at you? Be willing, because you are so beautiful. You are so much more beautiful than you can imagine. And the heartbreak is so complete and so powerful in knowing what it feels like to be you right now, because you do not feel beautiful. You do not feel complete right now, and yet you are, and it's possible to become that. And so I honor the brokenness of our current state. I honor the pain that is in us right now for that disconnect. And I honor the pressure of the continued contractions that will push you down that birth canal. And somebody will see your eyes at your moment of death and realize that you know that you are complete. You will be seen. And maybe that will be a person sitting at the bedside with you, unless we continue to treat death like we do, like some sort of pariah or something to be avoided, in which case it might be what we call an angel or some other entity who gets to see those eyes, knowing itself whole. But you will be seen. You will not be alone in that death, because nature will be witness to you in your death, just as it is in your daily breath. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate you. Thank you for holding space for this conversation. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be near you. I be witness of you.
Amen. I love your prayers. I'm so grateful for our friendship. I'm so grateful that you exist. I'm so grateful that everyone listening got to feel the purity of your heart and the depth of your love and the bravery of your grief and the beauty inside of the grief. For everyone listening, I hope that you really ingest this prayer and this invitation to see yourself as whole, to see yourself as perfect exactly as you are, and to make love to nature, to reconnect to nature, because in so doing, we will find that wholeness and perfection inside of ourselves. Sweet friends, I hope that you have learned as much and changed as much and evolved as much as I have during this beautiful conversation with Dr. Zach Bush. I love you. You are safe. You are whole. You are perfect exactly as you are. And it is such a journey to be on this human adventure with you. So if you've enjoyed this, if you have learned anything from this, my request would be that you share it. Share it with people so that we can share this media as medicine for the evolution, so that we can change the current paradigm that we're living under and start to see the possibility and start to see the wholeness inside of all of us. I love you, and I will see you next week on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This?